Derek's fist connected with my cheek, sending white-hot pain exploding across my face. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth as I stumbled backward, my vision blurring. Sarah screamed. The champagne glasses shattered on the hardwood floor. But through the chaos, through the throbbing ache, I smiled. Derek thought this punch would break me, force me to surrender my new home to his manipulative demands. Instead, he had just handed me exactly what I needed. Walking calmly to the kitchen, I grabbed ice for my swelling eye and texted my lawyer. Phase 1 complete. 6 months before that punch changed everything, I was washing dishes after Sunday dinner when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Sarah was helping clear the table, her sleeves rolled up from the warm Georgia evening, when I caught sight of dark purple marks wrapped around her wrist like twisted fingers. My daughter, my precious girl, had bruises that looked exactly like someone had grabbed her too hard. "Sarah, what happened to your arm?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle but concerned. She yanked her sleeve down so fast, she knocked over the salt shaker. "Oh, that? I fell getting out of the shower yesterday. You know how clumsy I can be." Her laugh sounded forced, brittle like old leaves, but I knew my daughter. Sarah had been a gymnast in high school, coordinated as a cat. She didn't just fall. And the way she flinched when Derek raised his voice to call for another beer from the living room told me everything I needed to know about who had caused those marks. Over the following weeks, I started paying closer attention. I'd spent 25 years in the Army before retiring, and you don't survive combat by ignoring warning signs. Derek's behavior began revealing itself like a photograph developing in solution, each detail becoming clearer and more disturbing. At the grocery store, I bumped into Martha Henderson, Sarah's old college roommate. After some small talk, she mentioned how worried she was about Sarah. "I hardly see her anymore, Kieran," Martha said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "When I call, Derek always answers and says she's busy. Last time I did talk to her, she seemed scared to say much. Cut the conversation short when I heard him come home. That evening, I called my neighbor across the street from Sarah's apartment. Betty Walsh had lived there 40 years and knew everything that happened on Pine Street. That husband of hers has quite the temper, Betty told me. Heard him screaming at her through the windows last Tuesday night. Something about money and her talking to people she shouldn't be talking to. Poor girl was crying so hard I almost called the police. The picture was becoming clearer, and it made me sick to my stomach. Derek was isolating my daughter, cutting her off from friends and family, controlling every aspect of her life. I'd seen this pattern before during domestic violence training in the military. Abusers always followed the same playbook. I started documenting everything. Every time Derek snapped at Sarah during family dinners. Every excuse she made for bruises or cuts. Every time she seemed to shrink into herself when he was around. I wrote it all down in a notebook I kept locked in my desk drawer. The breakthrough came when I decided to consult with Robert Hawkins, my lawyer and old Army buddy. Robert had handled my divorce years ago and knew how to deal with dangerous situations. "Kieran, what you're describing sounds like classic domestic abuse," Robert said, leaning back in his leather chair. "But here's the problem. Unless Sarah comes forward herself, there's not much we can do legally. And if Derek is as controlling as you say, he's probably convinced her that leaving would be worse than staying. So what do you suggest? We need concrete evidence. Video, audio, witnesses. Something that would hold up in court and force the authorities to act, even if Sarah isn't ready to press charges herself." That's when I started planning. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. Derek was too smart, too manipulative. He'd just deny everything and probably take his anger out on Sarah later. I needed him to reveal his true nature in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. The plan started forming when Sarah mentioned that Derek had been pressuring her to talk to me about money. He'd been asking questions about my finances, my properties, my will. At first, I thought he was just being nosy. Then I realized he was planning something. During one of our phone conversations, Sarah let slip that Derek's parents had lost their house to foreclosure 6 months ago. They'd been staying with Derek's brother, but that arrangement was falling apart. Derek was scrambling to find them somewhere to live, and he'd set his sights on me. "Dad, Derek thinks maybe his parents could stay with you for a while," Sarah said, her voice tight with stress. "Just until they get back on their feet. What do you think about that, honey?" "I think." She paused, and I could hear Derek's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "I think it would be really nice if you could help them out. Derek says family should stick together." But Derek had made a crucial mistake. He thought I was just some old man he could intimidate and manipulate. He had no idea that I'd spent decades dealing with bullies and terrorists, that I knew how to turn someone's aggression against them. I started making phone calls, reaching out to old military contacts. Detective Luis Martinez owed me a favor from when I'd helped his son get into West Point. Officer Janet Thompson had served under me in Iraq. If things went bad, I wanted people I could trust responding to the call. The more I learned about Derek, the more pieces fell into place. He'd been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years for anger management issues. His credit was destroyed. He'd been borrowing money from loan sharks and using Sarah's name on applications without her knowledge. Then came the phone call that changed everything. A nervous banker named Mrs. Peterson called to verify some information on a second mortgage application for my current house. An application I'd never submitted. "I'm sorry, Mr. O'Brien, but according to our records, you applied for a $75,000 line of credit using your property as collateral. Your daughter Sarah was listed as co-applicant." My hands shook as I explained that I'd never applied for any loan. Mrs. Peterson promised to investigate, and within 2 hours, she called back with news that made my blood boil. "Mr. O'Brien, it appears someone forged both your signature and your daughter's on the application. We're turning this over to the fraud department immediately. Derek wasn't just abusing my daughter, he was trying to steal my house right out from under me." The desperation in his scheme told me he was running out of time and options, which made him even more dangerous. That night, I called Robert and told him about the forged loan documents. "This changes everything," Robert said. "We've got him on fraud, forgery, identity theft. But Kieran, if he's this desperate, he's going to escalate. We need to move fast." "I'm ready," I told him. "Let's set the trap." The morning after discovering Derek's fraud attempt, I put my plan into motion. First stop was the real estate office of Beverly Collins, the best agent in Macon County. Beverly had sold me my current house 15 years ago and knew exactly what I was looking for. "Kieran, you want to buy another house?" Beverly raised her eyebrows over her reading glasses. "What's wrong with the place on Elm Street?" "Nothing's wrong with it. I'm thinking about downsizing, maybe something with some extra space for family visits." I handed her a list of requirements I'd written out carefully. "I want Derek to think this house is perfect for his parents to move in." Beverly studied the list. 4 bedrooms, mother-in-law suite, 2-car garage, nice neighborhood. "This is going to cost you, Kieran. Houses like this in good areas are running $300,000 and up. Money isn't the problem. Timing is." We looked at 6 properties over the next 2 weeks. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was perfect. Built in 1998, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, with a separate apartment over the garage that had its own entrance. The kind of setup that would make Derek's eyes light up with greed. I made an offer that same day, $20,000 over asking price for a quick closing. The sellers accepted immediately. While the paperwork processed, I installed a security system that would make the Pentagon jealous. 12 cameras, motion sensors, audio recording in every room, everything connected to my phone and automatically uploaded to a secure cloud server. "You planning on housing state secrets in this place?" asked Jim Morrison, the security installer. "Something like that." Robert helped me prepare the legal documents we'd need when Derek finally showed his true colors. Restraining order paperwork, assault charges, fraud reports, everything ready to file the moment we had sufficient evidence. Meanwhile, I reached out to my brother Tom in Charleston. Tom had been a high school principal for 30 years before retiring. He knew how to deal with bullies and wouldn't be intimidated by Derek's posturing. "You want me to drive 4 hours to watch your son-in-law lose his temper?" Tom asked when I called. "I want you there as a witness when he shows everyone what he really is. Count me in." That boy never did sit right with me. The hardest part was watching Sarah suffer while I set everything up. Derek's pressure was intensifying. She called me 3 times that week, each conversation more strained than the last. "Dad, Derek's really stressed about his parents," she said during one call. "They can't stay with his brother much longer. Derek thinks if you saw how nice they are, maybe you'd consider helping them out." I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the careful way she chose her words. Derek was probably listening to every conversation, coaching her on what to say. Well, why don't we have them over for dinner sometime? Let me get to know them better. Really? Oh, that would be wonderful. Derek will be so relieved. But first, I needed to create the right opportunity. The house closing was scheduled for the third Friday of the month. Perfect timing for a family celebration that would bring everyone together in one place. I called Sarah back the next day with the invitation. Honey, I bought a new house, and I'd love to have the family over to see it. Nothing fancy, just champagne and appetizers to celebrate. Oh, Dad, that's exciting. Derek will want to hear all about it. I bet he will, I thought. The week before the celebration, I coached Sarah's best friend Amy on what to expect. Amy worked as a nurse and had training in recognizing domestic abuse signs. She'd been trying to help Sarah for months, but hadn't known how. Kieran, I've been so worried about her, Amy said when I called. She's not the same person anymore. Derek has her completely under his thumb. That's about to change. I need you at the house celebration, and I need you to be ready with your phone camera. Can you do that? Absolutely. Sarah deserves better than this. I also reached out to Jennifer, Sarah's cousin from her mother's side. Jennifer was studying journalism at the University of Georgia and always had her phone out recording everything for social media. Her presence would seem natural, and her tendency to document everything would work perfectly for my purposes. The final piece was Detective Martinez. We'd served together in Afghanistan, and he'd gone into police work after discharge. Luis understood the importance of having the right people respond when things went sideways. You sure about this plan, Kieran? Luis asked when I briefed him. Sounds like you're deliberately provoking a dangerous man. I'm giving him enough rope to hang himself. Derek thinks he can intimidate an old man into giving up his property. Time to show him he picked the wrong target. All right, but the moment you feel unsafe, you call. We'll have units in the area. The night before the celebration, I did a final walkthrough of the new house. Every camera was positioned perfectly. Every recording device was functional. Every legal document was prepared and ready to file. I stood in the kitchen where I planned to confront Derek and imagined how it would play out. He'd try to intimidate me, maybe push me around a little. He'd expect me to fold like a cheap suit, the way he'd trained Sarah to respond to his aggression. Instead, he was going to get the shock of his life. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Derek is so excited about tomorrow. He says it's going to be a day our family remembers forever. I smiled and typed back. He's absolutely right about that. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes Georgia beautiful. I was up at 6, double-checking every detail of my preparations. The new house on Maple Ridge Drive looked perfect. Sunlight streaming through the tall windows, fresh flowers on the dining room table, champagne chilling in the refrigerator. Sarah arrived first with Derek, pulling up in his beat-up Honda that probably had 200,000 miles on it. Derek's eyes went wide when he saw the house, and I watched him do quick mental calculations about property values and mortgage payments. Dad, this place is gorgeous. Sarah hugged me at the front door, and I noticed how thin she'd gotten. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. It's something, isn't it? I kept my voice cheerful while Derek prowled through the front rooms like a wolf sizing up territory. Must have cost a pretty penny, Derek said, running his hand along the granite countertop in the kitchen. Market's crazy right now. What'd you pay, if you don't mind me asking? Derek. Sarah's voice carried a sharp edge of embarrassment. It's okay, honey. Derek's just curious about real estate. I smiled at my son-in-law, noting how his jaw tightened when I didn't immediately answer his question. Let me show everyone the rest of the house first. Amy arrived next, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a sundress that looked too cheerful for the tension I could feel building. She hugged Sarah extra long, and I saw her whisper something in my daughter's ear that made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. This place is amazing, Kieran, Amy said, though her attention stayed focused on Sarah's face, perfect for entertaining. My brother Tom pulled up in his pickup truck just as we finished the house tour. Tom had the bearing of a man who'd spent decades dealing with teenage troublemakers, calm and unimpressed by anyone's attempts at intimidation. Little brother, you sure know how to pick them, Tom said, shaking hands with Derek. I watched Derek's grip linger just a little too long, trying to establish dominance through a handshake. Tom just smiled and squeezed back harder. Jennifer arrived with her usual energy, already filming everything on her phone for her social media accounts. At 22, She had the confidence that comes from growing up in the digital age, completely comfortable documenting every moment of her life. "This house is going to look incredible on my Instagram," Jennifer announced, already posing for selfies in the living room. "Kieran, you have such amazing taste." Derek's demeanor shifted when he realized Jennifer was recording. His smile became more forced, his posture more rigid. Good. Let him be uncomfortable knowing everything was being documented. We were gathered in the kitchen, champagne glasses filled, when Derek cleared his throat for attention. "Before we toast Kieran's new place, I want to talk about something important." Derek's voice carried an artificial warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "My parents are having a tough time right now. They lost their house, and they need a place to stay while they get back on their feet." I felt the energy in the room shift. Sarah's shoulders hunched forward. Amy moved closer to her. Tom crossed his arms and studied Derek with the expression of a principal who'd just caught a student in a lie. "That's rough," Tom said. "Hard to lose your home at their age." "Exactly. Which is why I think this house would be perfect for them." Derek gestured around the kitchen as if he already owned it. "Kieran's got all this space, and Ruth and Paul are good people. They wouldn't be any trouble." Jennifer kept filming, sensing drama developing. Amy pulled out her phone as well, pretending to check messages while actually starting a voice recording app. "Where exactly would they stay?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Derek's eyes lit up. He'd been waiting for this question. "Well, there's that apartment over the garage, perfect for them. And if they needed more space, there are those extra bedrooms upstairs." "And how long would they be staying?" "Just until they get back on their feet." Derek's definition of temporary clearly differed from mine. "Could be a few months, maybe a year. Depends on how the job market treats Paul." Sarah was staring at her hands, not making eye contact with anyone. I could see her struggling with something, wanting to speak but afraid of the consequences. That's when the doorbell rang. "Expecting someone else?" Tom asked. I wasn't, but I had a sinking feeling about who it might be. Derek's smile widened as footsteps approached the front door. "I hope you don't mind," Derek said, "but I invited my parents to stop by. I wanted them to see what a generous man their son-in-law's father is." Ruth and Paul Morrison walked into my kitchen carrying overnight bags and wearing expressions of entitled expectation. Ruth immediately began examining the appliances as if she was planning to reorganize the entire space. Paul studied the property deed I'd left visible on the counter, exactly as I'd planned. "This is a beautiful home," Ruth announced to no one in particular. "Much nicer than that cramped apartment we've been stuck in with Derek's brother. The master bedroom upstairs would be perfect for us," Paul added, apparently having given this considerable thought. "We could help with maintenance, maybe do some gardening." I watched Derek's parents making themselves at home in my house, claiming space before I'd even agreed to let them visit. The audacity was breathtaking, but it was also exactly what I'd hoped would happen. "Now hold on," I said, raising my hand. "Nobody said anything about moving in. Derek mentioned you needed help, but this is moving pretty fast." Derek's mask slipped for just a second, revealing the anger underneath. "I thought family helped family, Kieran. You've got all this space, and they've got nowhere else to go. There are assisted living facilities, retirement communities. Have you looked into any of those options? Those places cost money we don't have." Derek's voice was getting sharper, more aggressive. "Besides, this house is too big for one person anyway. Seems selfish to keep it all to yourself when family is in need." The word selfish hung in the air like poison gas. Jennifer stopped pretending to take casual videos and started focusing her camera directly on Derek. Amy moved even closer to Sarah, who looked like she was about to be sick. "Derek, maybe we should talk about this privately," Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, Sarah. This affects the whole family. Everyone should hear this conversation." Derek turned back to me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He thought he had me cornered, surrounded by witnesses who would pressure me to be the generous family patriarch. Instead, he'd just given me exactly the audience I needed for what came next. "I'm sorry, Derek, but the answer is no. This is my house, and I'm not ready to share it with anyone." Derek's face flushed red. Ruth gasped as if I'd slapped her. Paul's jaw dropped open. "You're really going to turn away family in their time of need?" Derek's voice was rising, the false warmth completely gone now. I'm going to make decisions about my own property. That's when Derek took a step closer to me, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath, even though it wasn't even noon yet. Close enough to be threatening without quite crossing the line into assault. Maybe you need some time to think about this decision, Kieran. Maybe you don't understand how much my parents need this. Tom cleared his throat. Sounds like Kieran understands just fine. Derek spun around to face my brother. This doesn't concern you, old man. Watch your tone, Tom replied calmly. Kieran's my brother. His concerns are my concerns. Derek's hands clenched into fists. Sarah made a small, whimpering sound. Amy put her arm around my daughter's shoulders while continuing to record with her other hand. This is ridiculous, Derek said, turning back to me. You're being completely unreasonable. My parents are good people, and they deserve better than this treatment. I'm sure they are good people. But that doesn't mean they're entitled to live in my house. Derek's control snapped. Entitled? Let me tell you about entitled, you selfish old bastard. My parents lost everything because Paul got sick and couldn't work. They're living on Social Security and food stamps because the economy screwed them over. And you're sitting here in this mansion worried about your precious space. The room fell silent except for Jennifer's phone camera capturing every word. Ruth looked mortified. Paul stared at the floor. Sarah was crying openly now. Derek, please, Sarah whispered. This isn't helping. Shut up, Sarah. Adults are talking. Those 4 words changed everything. Tom straightened up to his full 6'3" height. Amy's recording finger never wavered. Jennifer's eyes went wide behind her phone screen, and I smiled, because Derek had just revealed exactly who he was to everyone in the room. I think you need to apologize to my daughter, I said quietly. I think you need to mind your own business, and worry about being a better father and grandfather, because if you don't help my parents, you're going to find out what happens when family doesn't stick together. The threat was unmistakable, clear, witnessed by 6 people and recorded on 2 phones. Is that some kind of threat, Derek? Derek looked around the room, seeming to realize for the first time that everyone was staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. His parents looked horrified by their son's behavior. Sarah was sobbing. Tom was watching Derek like a hawk watches a rabbit. But Derek was too angry to back down now. Too committed to his course of action. Too stupid to recognize that he'd already lost. Take it however you want to take it, old man. But family takes care of family. And if you can't understand that, maybe Sarah needs to reconsider which side of the family she wants to be loyal to. Another threat. Another line crossed. I walked calmly to the refrigerator and pulled out the champagne bottle, beginning to remove the foil wrapper. Well, Derek, I appreciate you being so clear about your position. Let me be equally clear about mine. I looked him directly in the eyes and said the words that would change everything. No. My parents aren't moving in with me. Not your parents. Not anyone's parents. This is my house, and I'll decide who lives here. Derek's face went purple with rage. His hands shook. His breathing became rapid and shallow. And then he did exactly what I'd been waiting for him to do. Derek's fist came without warning. A right cross that caught me on the left side of my face, with enough force to snap my head sideways. The impact sent lightning bolts of pain through my skull, and I tasted blood immediately as my lips split against my teeth. Sarah's scream pierced the air like a fire alarm. Derek, no! I stumbled backward against the kitchen island, my vision swimming, but I forced myself to stay upright. Through the ringing in my ears, I could hear gasps of shock and horror from my family members. Jennifer's phone clattered to the floor as she jumped backward. Amy shouted something I couldn't make out over the chaos. Derek stood there breathing hard, his knuckles already starting to bruise, staring at me with a mixture of satisfaction and surprise. He'd expected me to crumble, to beg for mercy, to agree to anything he demanded just to avoid another beating. Instead, I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a grimace of pain, but a genuine expression of satisfaction, because Derek Morrison had just handed me exactly what I needed to destroy him completely. You stupid old fool, Derek snarled, shaking his hand from the impact. I tried to do this the easy way. I tried to be reasonable. But you just couldn't see past your own selfishness. Ruth Morrison was pressed against the far wall, both hands covering her mouth in horror. Derek, what have you done? What have you done? Paul looked like he was having a heart attack, his face pale and sweating. Son, You can't hit people. You can't solve problems by hitting people. But Derek was beyond reason now, high on adrenaline and the illusion of power that violence gives weak men. He took another step toward me, raising his fist again. Maybe you need another lesson in family loyalty, old man. Maybe you need to understand what happens when you cross the Morrison family. That's when Sarah found her voice. My daughter, who had been shrinking into herself for months, who had made excuses for bruises and learned to flinch at raised voices, suddenly straightened up to her full height. Her tears stopped. Her hands stopped shaking. And when she spoke, her voice carried a strength I hadn't heard from her in years. Don't you dare touch my father. Derek spun around, apparently having forgotten that Sarah was in the room. Sarah, shut your mouth and get in the car. We're leaving. No. Such a simple word. But it hit Derek like a physical blow. His eyes widened in disbelief. What did you say to me? I said no. I'm not leaving. And I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else. Sarah walked across the kitchen to where the champagne bottle sat on the counter, her movements deliberate and controlled. She picked up the heavy glass bottle by the neck and turned to face her husband. You want to talk about family loyalty, Derek? Let me tell you about family loyalty. Family doesn't threaten family. Family doesn't hit family. Family doesn't steal from family or forge signatures, or try to intimidate elderly people into giving up their homes. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Sarah, what are you talking about? I wouldn't. I know about the loan applications, Derek. I know you've been forging Dad's signature and mine. I know about the gambling debts. I know about the money you've been stealing from your parents' Social Security checks. Ruth gasped. Derek, you promised you were just borrowing that money. You said you'd pay it back. I know about the bruises you've given me, Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger with every word. I know about the times you've pushed me down the stairs and told everyone I'm clumsy. I know about the friends you've scared away and the job interviews you sabotaged because you were afraid I'd make more money than you. Derek was backing away from Sarah now, his face cycling through expressions of rage, fear, and disbelief. Sarah, honey, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Let's go home and talk about this. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 3 years. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. Sarah raised the champagne bottle, holding it like a club. You want to hit someone else? You want to threaten my father in his own home? Try me first. Derek lunged for the bottle, trying to wrestle it away from Sarah. They struggled for several seconds, Derek's superior strength giving him the advantage until Sarah brought her knee up hard into his groin. Derek doubled over, gasping and cursing. Sarah stepped back and swung the champagne bottle, connecting with the back of his head with a solid thunk that sent him crashing to his knees. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Sarah shouted, her voice echoing off the kitchen walls. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Derek tried to get back to his feet, blood trickling from his scalp where the bottle had connected. You crazy! You hit me! You actually hit me! How does it feel? Sarah's voice was cold as winter rain. How does it feel to be hit by someone who's supposed to love you? I walked calmly to the freezer and pulled out a bag of frozen peas, pressing it against my swelling cheek. The ice felt good against my split lip, and I could already feel the bruising starting to develop around my eye. Derek noticed my composure and realized something was wrong with his narrative of intimidation and control. Why aren't you scared? Why aren't you calling the cops or begging me to stop? I pulled out my phone and typed a quick text message, making sure Derek could see exactly what I was writing. Phase 1 complete. Target acquired. Send backup. Derek's face went white as he read the message. What? What is that supposed to mean? It means you just did exactly what I expected you to do. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, approaching fast. Derek's head whipped toward the window, then back to me. You set me up. This was all a setup. Derek, you set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity to show everyone who you really are. Tom walked over to Derek and put a hand on his shoulder, not gently. I think you better sit down and wait for the police to arrive, son. Derek tried to shrug off Tom's grip and immediately discovered that 68-year-old retired principals can still be surprisingly strong when they need to be. Let go of me. This is assault. I'm the victim here. Amy held up her phone, still recording. Actually, Derek, I've got video of you threatening Kieran and punching him, and audio of you telling Sarah to shut up and trying to extort money from an elderly man. Jennifer picked up her phone from where she'd dropped it. checking to make sure the video was still recording. Same here. Plus everything automatically uploads to the cloud, so even if you break our phones, the evidence is already saved. Derek looked around the room desperately, seeming to realize for the first time that he was surrounded by witnesses and cameras, and that his version of events wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. Ruth, Paul, tell them I was just trying to help you. Tell them I was just standing up for family. But Ruth Morrison was crying, shaking her head back and forth. Derek, we never asked you to hurt anyone. We never wanted this. Paul couldn't even look at his son, hitting an old man in his own home. What kind of man did we raise? The sirens were getting closer, and Derek was starting to panic. He tried once more to assert control, pointing at Sarah. This is all her fault. She's been poisoning everyone against me. She's been lying about everything. The only person poisoning this family is you, I said calmly, still holding the frozen peas against my face. And the lying stops today. Derek made one last desperate move, rushing toward the back door like he was going to run. Tom was ready for him, stepping into his path and wrapping him up in what looked like a gentle hug, but was actually a restraining hold that kept Derek from going anywhere. Where you going, son? Police will want to talk to you. Blue and red lights flashed through the front windows as 2 police cars pulled into my driveway. Derek stopped struggling and just stood there, finally understanding that his world was about to collapse completely. This isn't over, he said, looking directly at me. This isn't over by a long shot. I smiled at him again, that same genuine expression of satisfaction. Derek, it was over the moment you walked into my house and thought you could intimidate me. You just didn't know it yet. Heavy footsteps approached the front door, and I heard the familiar voice of Detective Luis Martinez calling out, "Police. Everyone stay where you are." Derek Morrison's reign of terror over my family was about to end. Detective Luis Martinez walked into my kitchen like he owned the place, his partner Officer Janet Thompson right behind him. Luis had barely changed since our Army days, still carrying himself with the calm confidence of someone who'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Kieran, what seems to be the problem here?" Luis asked, his eyes immediately taking in the scene. Derek restrained by Tom, Sarah holding a champagne bottle, broken glass on the floor, and me with a bag of frozen peas pressed against my rapidly swelling face. Derek here decided to use his fists to win an argument about housing arrangements, I said, gesturing toward my son-in-law. Officer Thompson was already pulling out her notepad, scanning the room and counting witnesses. "Sir, are you Derek Morrison?" "I want a lawyer," Derek said immediately. "These people are trying to frame me for something I didn't do." "Nobody's framing you for anything," Amy said, stepping forward with her phone. "I recorded the whole thing. Want to see the video of you punching a 68-year-old man?" Derek's face went even paler as he realized the extent of the evidence against him. "That recording is illegal. You can't record someone without their consent." "Actually," Jennifer chimed in, "Georgia is a one-party consent state. And since Amy was part of the conversation, she had every right to record it. Plus, I was live streaming on Instagram, so about 300 people watched you assault Kieran in real time." Officer Thompson looked at Derek with the expression of someone who dealt with too many bullies who thought they could talk their way out of consequences. "Mr. Morrison, why don't you have a seat while we sort this out?" That's when Ruth Morrison broke down completely. "Officers, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about my son," Ruth sobbed, her words coming out in a rush. "This isn't the first time he's hit someone. He's been hitting us too, taking our Social Security money, forcing us to lie for him." Derek spun around to stare at his mother in horror. "Mom, what are you doing? Shut up." "Don't you tell me to shut up." Ruth's voice carried decades of suppressed anger. "I'm 72 years old, Derek Morrison, and I'm tired of being afraid of my own son." Paul Morrison reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook with a battered cover. His hands shook as he offered it to Detective Martinez. "Everything's in here," Paul said quietly. "Every time Derek hit us, every dollar he stole, every lie he made us tell. I've been keeping track for 2 years." Derek lunged toward his father, but Tom's grip tightened, keeping him in place. "Dad, you can't do this to me. I'm your son. I was trying to help you. Help us." Paul's voice cracked with emotion. "Son, you've been stealing our medicine money to pay gambling debts. You forced us to sign papers we didn't understand. You told us if we didn't go along with your schemes, you'd put us in a nursing home and never visit. Detective Martinez flipped through the notebook, his expression growing darker with each page. Mr. Morrison, this documents financial elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and multiple instances of domestic violence. This is serious felony territory. Officer Thompson was examining Amy's phone video, watching Derek's assault on me play back in high definition, and we've got clear video evidence of battery and terroristic threats. Mr. Morrison, you're looking at some significant charges here. Sarah stepped forward, still holding the champagne bottle but no longer needing it as a weapon. There's more, officers. Derek has been abusing me for 3 years. I have medical records from emergency room visits where I claimed I fell or had accidents. I was too scared to tell the truth then, but I'm ready to tell it now. Derek's lawyer training kicked in as he realized how much trouble he was in. All of these people are lying. This is a conspiracy to steal my inheritance from Kieran. Sarah's been brainwashed by her father. My parents are senile and don't understand what they're saying. Senile? Ruth's voice rose to a shout. I may be old, Derek Morrison, but I'm not stupid. And I'm certainly not deaf. I heard every word you said about using Kieran's house to pay off your debts. That's when my phone rang. Robert Hawkins's name appeared on the screen. Excuse me, detective. This is my lawyer. He's been expecting this call. I answered on speaker. Robert? Phase 1 is complete. Understood. I'm in my car, 5 minutes away. Are the police there? Detective Martinez and Officer Thompson are here now. Perfect. I've got restraining order paperwork ready to file, and the bank's fraud department wants to press charges for the forged loan applications. How's your face? I touched my swollen cheek gingerly. I'll live. Derek punches about as hard as you'd expect from someone who's never been in a real fight. Derek's eyes went wide as he realized this conversation meant I'd been planning for this confrontation. You set me up. This whole thing was a trap. Derek, you set yourself up, Detective Martinez said, closing Paul's notebook. Mr. O'Brien here just gave you enough rope to hang yourself. Officer Thompson finished watching the video evidence and looked up at Derek with disgust. Mr. Morrison, you're under arrest for battery, terroristic threats, elder abuse, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Derek tried one more time to run, breaking free from Tom's grip and heading for the back door. He made it 3 steps before Officer Thompson tackled him. Professional and efficient. The handcuffs were on his wrists before he stopped struggling. This isn't fair, Derek shouted as they hauled him to his feet. I was just trying to help my family. Everything I did was for my family. Helping your family by forging loan documents? Detective Martinez asked. Helping your family by stealing from elderly parents? Helping your family by beating your wife? I never beat Sarah. She's lying. Sarah pulled up her sleeves, revealing bruises in various stages of healing running up both arms. These are from last Tuesday, when I told you I wanted to get a job. And this one, she lifted her hair to show a dark mark on her neck, is from Thursday, when I asked if we could visit my dad. Derek's face crumpled, as he realized his lies were falling apart faster than he could tell them. Sarah, please, don't do this to me. I love you. Love doesn't leave bruises, Derek. Love doesn't threaten and steal and manipulate. Ruth Morrison walked over to her son, looking up at him with the disappointed expression only a mother can give. Derek, I don't know what happened to the little boy I raised, but this man wearing his face is a stranger to me. As they led Derek toward the front door, he made one final attempt at intimidation. You think this is over? You think putting me in jail for a few hours is going to solve anything? I've got friends, Kieran. I've got people who owe me favors. This is just the beginning. I smiled at him one last time. Derek, where you're going, your friends won't be able to help you. But I appreciate you making those threats in front of 2 police officers. Really helps with the terroristic threats charge. The police car doors slammed shut with Derek still shouting threats from the back seat. As the car pulled away, the kitchen fell quiet except for Ruth's quiet sobbing and the sound of sirens fading into the distance. Robert Hawkins arrived as promised, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents and wearing the satisfied expression of a lawyer who'd just watched his careful planning pay off perfectly. How many charges are we looking at? I asked him. Battery, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, terroristic threats, domestic violence, and probably a few more once we dig deeper into his finances. Robert pulled out a folder thick with paperwork. The district attorney is very interested in this case. Apparently Derek's been on their radar for other things. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table now, Tom's arm around her shoulders, both of them talking quietly. Amy was helping Ruth and Paul gather up Derek's belongings, so they wouldn't have to see them anymore. Jennifer was still filming, documenting everything for what would probably become the most viral Instagram story of her college career. "Is it really over?" Sarah asked, looking up at me with hope and fear warring in her eyes. "The hard part's just beginning, honey," I told her honestly. "Court dates, testimony, probably threats from Derek's friends, but the worst is definitely behind us." Ruth Morrison wiped her eyes and looked around at the mess her son had made of what should have been a celebration. "Kieran, I'm so sorry. We never wanted any of this." "Ruth, you and Paul are victims here too. Don't apologize for being brave enough to tell the truth." Detective Martinez finished his paperwork and handed me his card. "Kieran, Derek's going to be arraigned Monday morning. The prosecutor will want victim impact statements from you, Sarah, and Derek's parents. You feel comfortable testifying?" I've been waiting 3 years to tell this story to a judge. As the police finished their reports, and the last of the evidence was collected, my family began cleaning up the mess Derek had left behind. Broken champagne glasses, scattered papers, and the lingering tension of violence. But underneath it all, I could feel something else. Relief. The fear that had been hanging over my daughter for years was finally lifting. The secret that had been eating away at all of us was finally out in the open. Derek Morrison thought he could intimidate and manipulate his way into stealing my house and controlling my family. Instead, he'd just earned himself a prison sentence and given us all the evidence we needed to put him away for a very long time. Phase 1 was definitely complete. Monday morning came with the kind of cold rain that seems to seep into your bones, perfect weather for Derek's arraignment. I sat in the courthouse next to Robert Hawkins, watching my son-in-law shuffle into the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, looking like he hadn't slept much over the weekend. Judge Patricia Caldwell had a reputation for being tough on domestic violence cases, which was exactly what we wanted. She reviewed the charges with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every type of family destruction imaginable. "Mr. Morrison, you're charged with aggravated battery, terroristic threats, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and domestic violence. How do you plead?" Derek's public defender, a nervous young man named Bradley Cooper, whispered frantically in Derek's ear. But Derek pushed him away and stood up on his own. "Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. I'm the victim of a conspiracy." Judge Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed the evidence submitted by the prosecutor, video recordings, witness statements, medical records, and financial documents. Exactly who is conspiring against you? My wife's family, Your Honor. They've been trying to steal my inheritance rights for years." "What inheritance rights would those be?" Derek's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table as his client ignored all legal advice and kept talking. "Kieran O'Brien is my father-in-law. When he dies, my wife Sarah should inherit his property. But he's been trying to cut us out by hiding assets and making up stories about me." Judge Caldwell studied Derek like a biologist examining an interesting but unpleasant specimen. "Mr. Morrison, are you suggesting that you have legal rights to property owned by someone who is very much alive?" "Family should stick together, Your Honor. But some people are too selfish to understand that." The prosecutor, Maria Santos, stood up with a stack of documents. "Your Honor, the defendant has no legal claim to Mr. O'Brien's property. The charges stem from the defendant's attempt to force his way into Mr. O'Brien's home through threats and violence, followed by fraud attempts when intimidation failed." Judge Caldwell reviewed the video evidence on her tablet, watching Derek punch me and threaten my family. Her expression grew colder with each replay. "Mr. Morrison, I'm denying bail. You're remanded to county custody pending trial." Derek's lawyer finally found his voice. "Your Honor, my client has no prior convictions. He's married with family ties to the community. Mr. Cooper, your client just demonstrated in open court that he believes he's entitled to other people's property and that violence is an acceptable way to get what he wants. That makes him a flight risk and a danger to the community." As they led Derek away, he turned to stare at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, old man. I'll get out, and when I do, I'll remember everyone who betrayed me." Judge Caldwell's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Morrison, you just threatened a witness in my courtroom. Add contempt of court to the charges, and add another 30 days to whatever sentence you eventually receive." 2 weeks later, 3 men in leather jackets approached my house around 9 in the evening. I was reading on the front porch, enjoying the unusually warm October weather, when they walked up my driveway with the swagger of people who thought they were intimidating. "You Kieran O'Brien?" The leader was a large man with prison tattoos covering his arms and neck. "That's right. What can I do for you, gentlemen?" "Derek Morrison asked us to deliver a message. Says you need to think real hard about dropping those charges against him." I set my book down carefully and smiled at them. "Derek's in jail. How exactly did he ask you to do anything? He's got friends on the inside. Friends on the outside. Friends who don't like seeing good men railroaded by lying families." That's when my neighbor Betty Walsh called the police from her window across the street. But I wasn't worried about these 3. I'd been expecting them. "You know, it's interesting that you mention good men," I said, standing up slowly, "because I know quite a bit about good men. Served with some in Afghanistan. Fought beside some in Iraq." The 3 men looked less certain of themselves as I continued talking. "In fact, some of those good men live right here in Georgia. Some of them might be arriving any minute now." Right on cue, 2 pickup trucks pulled into my driveway. 4 men got out, all of them wearing Army veteran caps and moving with the kind of controlled precision that comes from combat experience. Colonel James Mitchell, my old commanding officer, stepped forward. "Kieran, these boys bothering you?" Sergeant Major William Ross positioned himself to cut off the street exit. Master Sergeant David Clark and Staff Sergeant Robert Hayes flanked the 3 leather jacket boys, who suddenly looked much less confident about their intimidation mission. "They were just leaving," I said. "Weren't you, gentlemen?" The leader of the 3 looked around at the Army veterans surrounding him and made a quick calculation about how badly this could go for him. "This ain't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, it is," Colonel Mitchell replied. "And if we see you around here again, we'll assume you're here to cause trouble for our brother. You understand what that means?" The 3 men retreated to their motorcycles and roared away into the night, leaving rubber marks on my driveway and taking Derek's last hope of intimidation with them. 6 weeks later, Derek's trial began. The courtroom was packed with family members, neighbors, and what seemed like half the domestic violence advocates in central Georgia. Derek had hired a better lawyer with money borrowed from somewhere, but it didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. Amy's video played on screens throughout the courtroom, showing Derek's assault in crystal-clear detail. Sarah testified about 3 years of escalating abuse, her voice strong and clear as she described the fear that had controlled her life. Ruth and Paul Morrison broke down as they testified about their son's theft and violence against them. The prosecutor introduced evidence of Derek's gambling addiction, his mounting debts, and his systematic plan to steal my property through fraud and intimidation. Derek's new lawyer tried to paint him as a desperate man driven to extremes by financial pressure and family dysfunction. But Derek couldn't help himself. He took the stand against all legal advice and spent 2 hours explaining why everyone else was wrong and he was the real victim. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Judge Caldwell sentenced Derek to 8 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 5 years. She also issued a permanent restraining order protecting me, Sarah, and Derek's parents from any contact with him. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Caldwell said as Derek stood for sentencing, "you systematically abused and manipulated vulnerable family members for financial gain. You used violence and threats to try to steal property that was never yours. And even when caught, you showed no remorse and continued threatening your victims." Derek tried to interrupt, but his lawyer physically restrained him. "The court finds that you represent a continued danger to your family and the community. When you're eventually released, you'll be required to complete anger management counseling, domestic violence intervention programs, and alcohol abuse treatment." As they led Derek away in shackles, he looked back one more time at where I sat with Sarah, Tom, Amy, and Derek's parents. "This won't be the end," he called out. "I'll appeal. I'll get out. And when I do," Judge Caldwell's gavel cut him off. "Mr. Morrison, I suggest you spend your time in prison learning to accept responsibility for your actions rather than planning revenge against people who simply told the truth about your crimes." Derek Morrison disappeared through the courthouse doors, beginning an 8-year journey toward hopefully becoming a better person. But somehow, I doubted he'd use the time wisely. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I stood in the same kitchen where he'd tried to intimidate me, but everything had changed. Sarah was laughing at something Amy had said while they cooked Sunday dinner together, the sound bright and musical in a way I hadn't heard for years. My daughter had gained weight. Her face had color again, and most importantly, she no longer flinched when someone raised their voice or made sudden movements. Ruth and Paul Morrison had moved into the apartment above my garage, just as Derek had demanded, but under completely different circumstances. They paid reasonable rent, helped with yard work, and had become the kind of family addition that actually made life better instead of more complicated. Ruth's famous pot roast tonight. Paul called from the living room, where he was watching a Falcons game with Tom. Better than anything we ever got when Derek was cooking. Ruth wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. Derek never cooked. He ordered pizza and complained about the cost. It was remarkable how much our understanding of Derek's behavior had changed once we started talking honestly about it. The man we'd all been walking on eggshells around turned out to be nothing more than a bully who'd convinced his family that his anger was their fault. Sarah had started college again, studying social work with a focus on domestic violence intervention. She wanted to help other women recognize the warning signs she'd missed for so long. 3 times a week, she volunteered at the county shelter, sharing her story with women who were still living in the fear she'd escaped. "The hardest part isn't leaving," Sarah told me one evening. "It's believing you deserve better." Derek convinced me that his anger was my fault, that if I just tried harder to make him happy, he'd stop hurting me. Amy had moved in with Sarah temporarily while she looked for a permanent place, but I suspected the arrangement might become permanent. The 2 women had developed the kind of friendship that comes from surviving trauma together, and Amy's steady presence seemed to help Sarah rebuild her confidence. Jennifer had turned her Instagram documentation of Derek's assault into a viral domestic violence awareness campaign. The video had been viewed over 2 million times, with thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of family abuse and manipulation. Tom had decided to stay in Georgia permanently, selling his house in Charleston and buying a small place just 10 minutes from mine. "Family should stick together," he'd said with a grin, unknowingly echoing Derek's words but with completely different meaning. The legal aftermath had been satisfying but exhausting. Derek's appeals were rejected at every level. His attempts to contact Sarah or his parents from prison resulted in additional charges and extended his sentence. The restraining orders were renewed annually, and Detective Martinez assured me they'd be enforced seriously. "Derek's got a reputation in county lockup," Louise told me during one of our periodic check-ins. "Wife beaters and child abusers don't fare well in prison. He's been moved to protective custody twice already." I didn't take any pleasure in Derek's suffering, but I wasn't going to lose sleep over it either. He'd made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. The most unexpected development had been Sarah's new relationship. David Chen was a middle school teacher she'd met at the community college, a quiet man with infinite patience and a genuine interest in helping her heal from her trauma. Their relationship moved slowly, built on friendship and trust rather than passion and control. "David treats me like I'm made of gold," Sarah told me one afternoon. "Not fragile, but precious. It's taken me months to understand the difference." Ruth had reconnected with old friends Derek had driven away, rebuilding social connections that had been severed by her son's jealousy and control. Paul had started a small woodworking business in my garage, creating beautiful furniture pieces that sold at the local craft fairs. "We should have stood up to Derek years ago," Ruth admitted to me one evening. "But we were afraid he'd abandon us, afraid we couldn't take care of ourselves, afraid we'd lose Sarah and any future grandchildren. Fear makes people do things they know are wrong," I replied. "The important thing is, you found your courage when it mattered most." The house on Maple Ridge Drive had become exactly what I'd hoped when I bought it. A gathering place for a family that had learned to support each other instead of enabling abuse. Sunday dinners were loud and chaotic, filled with laughter and argument, and the kind of honest communication Derek had never allowed. 6 months turned into a year. Sarah graduated from college with honors and got a job at the domestic violence shelter where she'd been volunteering. David proposed with a ring he'd made in Paul's woodworking shop, and Sarah said yes with tears of joy instead of tears of fear. Derek sent letters from prison occasionally, always attempting to manipulate one family member into helping with his appeals or convincing the others to forgive him. The letters went straight to Robert Hawkins' office as evidence of continued harassment, but they also served as reminders of how he'd never really accepted responsibility for his actions. He still thinks he's the victim, Sarah said after reading one particularly pathetic attempt at emotional manipulation. He still thinks if he can just find the right words, we'll all remember how much we used to love him and forget everything he did to us. Some people never learn, Amy observed. They keep using the same tactics even when those tactics have failed completely. 2 years after Derek's conviction, I received a call from the parole board. Derek was eligible for early release consideration and had requested family members to speak on his behalf. Sarah, Ruth, Paul, and I all attended the hearing, but not to support Derek's release. My ex-husband has never apologized for hitting me, Sarah testified. He's never acknowledged that his violence was wrong. His letters from prison blame everyone else for his situation and promise revenge against people who testified truthfully at his trial. Ruth's testimony was even more devastating. My son stole our medication money to pay gambling debts. He threatened to put us in a nursing home if we didn't help him commit fraud. He's a danger to elderly people and vulnerable women. Paul's hands shook as he read his statement. Derek has never shown remorse. He's never acknowledged that stealing from his parents was wrong. He's never apologized for the bruises he gave his mother. My testimony was brief. Derek Morrison planned and executed a systematic campaign to steal my property through fraud and intimidation. When that failed, he used violence. His letters from prison indicate he still believes he was justified and that we somehow deserved what he did to us. The parole board denied Derek's request unanimously. He'd serve his full 8-year sentence. As we left the courthouse that day, Sarah squeezed my hand. Thank you, Dad. For everything. For protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. For showing me it was possible to fight back. Thank you for finding the courage to tell the truth when it mattered most. 3 years after Derek's conviction, Sarah and David's wedding took place in the backyard of the house Derek had tried to steal. Ruth and Paul walked Sarah down the aisle together, tears streaming down their faces. Amy was the maid of honor. Tom performed the ceremony, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. As I watched my daughter promise to love and honor a man who would never raise a hand to her, never threaten her, never try to control her, I thought about the lessons Derek had taught us all without meaning to. Evil really does thrive when good people stay silent and afraid. But courage multiplies when one person stands up and gives others permission to be brave. Family bonds can be stronger after being tested by fire. And sometimes the best trap really is just the truth. Derek had tried to use our love for Sarah against us, counting on our desire to avoid conflict to let him get away with abuse and theft. Instead, he'd united us in a way we'd never been united before. The house he'd tried to steal had become a sanctuary. The family he'd tried to control had become a support network. The woman he'd tried to break had become a force for helping other victims find their own strength. 5 years after Derek's sentencing, I got a call from Detective Martinez. Kieran, thought you should know. Derek Morrison was released from prison yesterday. Any word on his plans? Moved to Alabama to live with his cousin. Part of his parole agreement is that he can't contact any of you or return to Georgia without permission. We'll be keeping an eye on things, but it sounds like he's planning to start over somewhere else. Think he learned anything? Prison changes some people. Others just get better at hiding who they really are. That evening, I gathered my expanded family for what had become our traditional Friday night dinners. Sarah and David brought their 6-month-old daughter, Emma, named after Sarah's mother. Ruth was teaching Amy to knit. Paul was showing Tom photos of his latest furniture project. Derek got out of prison today, I announced during dessert. The conversation stopped. Emma gurgled happily in her high chair, unaware of the sudden tension in the room. Is he coming here? Ruth asked quietly. He's not allowed to. And even if he tried, we're ready for him. Sarah looked around the table at the people who'd stood by her through the worst period of her life. I'm not afraid anymore. If Derek wants to start trouble, he'll find out we're not the same family he left behind. Besides, David added with a smile, Emma needs to learn early that her family doesn't back down from bullies. We raised our glasses in a toast to surviving, to thriving, to the truth that sets you free even when it's painful to tell. Derek Morrison had taught us that sometimes the most important battles happen within families, between people who are supposed to love and protect each other. He'd shown us that abuse thrives in silence and darkness, but withers when exposed to light. Most importantly, he'd proven that courage is contagious. When one person finds the strength to say no more, it gives everyone else permission to stop being afraid. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was exactly what I'd hoped it would become. A place where family means safety instead of fear, where love means support instead of control, where the truth is always welcome, even when it's hard to hear. Derek had gotten out of prison, but we'd gotten something even more valuable. We'd gotten free. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping peace and standing up for what's right? Sometimes staying silent feels easier than confronting someone we love, but silence can enable the very behavior we're trying to avoid. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own experiences with family conflict, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear Sarah's message of courage. Your support helps these stories reach people who are still living in fear, still wondering if they deserve better. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength in impossible situations. And most importantly, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts about family loyalty, standing up to bullies, or any message of hope you'd like to pass along to others facing similar challenges. Thank you for listening to this story about the power of truth, the importance of courage, and the families we create when we refuse to let fear make our decisions for us. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, especially by the people who claim to love you. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is showing them they don't have to be afraid anymore.